But overall, the comic book was generally okay. I mean,
no, this is good. I wouldn't even say this is okay. This is good.
Can you even use these characters? Alan Moore didn't allow it. Can you? Is this blasphemy?
Yes.
Blasphemy. Okay, then we're good.
Without a doubt, this is the Latin Vulgate,
right?
So, and you didn't listen. You said no, you can't worship the Apocrypha. You're like, no, we're right over here.
Gathered together from the cosmic reaches of the universe, here in this great hall of justice, are the most powerful forces of good ever assembled. Dedicated to truth, justice, and peace for all mankind.
Hey everybody, we have someone here in for our comic reviews, a former comic reader. He was at the event. If you saw on our YouTube page, we have many videos from interviews from many fans that were out the night at, what was it, like 12 midnight?
11:57, Midtown Comics on 40th and 7th Avenue in New York City.
Raph, thank you for your help, bro.
We interviewed many fans. These guys got
Parker,
some great interviews.
Eric, John.
So, since we did this, I just want to do one quick thing before we start. We're comic readers, so you can find your comics at your library. This is a library book that Cal got. We have Doomsday Clock, which we're talking about here, and I got a bunch of books, a Vertigo book, First Bright. I got Armory Wars, which I found out when we went to the New Jersey Expo. Rex Morales, he's doing this book, so I'm going to check this out. Books I'm reading, there's a bunch of stuff. Captain America's Fixed. Hey, Captain America's Fixed. And Mike Mignola's Rasputin. We've seen it before in Hellboy.
I don't know about Captain America being fixed, but okay.
So, let's get to Doomsday Clock, right? So, in Doomsday Clock, we saw it in Comic-Con. They gave us a little ash can with the book in there. And we had the world's in turmoil. So, what's his name? Was Adrian Veitch.
Ozymandias, he had his master plan, and that was undone by Rorschach's journal, which was found. What is this now? That story took place, it was the late 80s. This is 1992. This is about, 7-8 years later? So, you've had world peace for about, let's say, 8 years, and now it's all been undone by the discovery of this journal. The world's going topsy-turvy. President President Redford, since they didn't want to give the whole name, is trying to keep things together. They're trying to control the outflow of information. The wall that was built to keep the Mexicans out, the United States are now, are the Mexicans breaking through the wall to the States?
Breaking through the wall.
Okay. So we see, a whole bunch of stuff. Life is, art is imitating life, unfortunately.
Yes, yeah.
Well, the EU has fallen off the map. The Russians are invading Poland, Belarus.
Yes.
The world's just going to hell in a handbasket.
There's also Rorschach shows up.
That's the crazy part about the whole comic,
So let's keep going. So because they're in prison where they, there's a couple of other people I don't believe we met, like Marinette and the Mime.
Right.
These are based on Charlton characters. They're trying to keep the motif, if you will, the same motif of using Charlton characters for DC's purposes. So where we had the Peacemaker, we would have had the Comedian. Where we would have had Captain Atom, we have Dr. Manhattan. And where we have the Mime and the Marionette, we have, this is, I believe, Punch and Julie from the Charlton characters. And they are Watchmanized.
Yes.
It's funny, I was thinking that they were the Joker and Harley Quinn.
Well, the Joker and Harley Quinn were once Punch and Julie.
No, but I'm just saying, so you could see that in the comic. That's what I was thinking. But hey, you read the whole thing.
Well, in this one, after we introduced to those characters and some of the Mime's weird powers, which aren't revealed yet, but we're they let us know that this is not the same Rorschach, right? They let us know, but I mean, it's kind of hard if you haven't read The Watchmen before, and me and Cal talked about it before. That you probably should read Watchmen before you read this. It'll be seamless. But then when you just walk in, the reveal of why he's different is kind of whatever. So then once you get to that point, they're drawn in and they have to save Marinette's baby. They come with Rorschach, and then they run into Ozymandias. It's like, This is the guy that's in his caused all the drama. They run into him, but he has this other side plot that's going on. And of course, they could try to take him in for the $1 million, but he can give them more. So of course, they sit in on that.
So when he encountered Ozymandias, didn't you guys feel that was just, I don't know, to me a little bit? It didn't seem natural. It just seemed just out of there. Just popped
It's a
up.
twist. I think
You
it
know,
was a twist.
I thought him being in full outfit was more wild than anything else. I was like, why are you still wearing an outfit?
That's a good point.
But then I realized a lot of this it leans heavily on the fact or the anticipation that people are familiar with Watchmen, or either read Watchmen or at least familiar with Watchmen. And that's the only reason I can say that, think that they put him in full regalia. Because if you just put him in a suit, then it's like, oh, new readers may not know that this guy was actually a superhero or something.
Interesting point.
Other than that, he's looped out and he's reliving something. But his this plot he has kind of feeds on itself, because at the end of the day, what was it that Ozymandias wanted? He wanted to somehow equate world peace, and he wanted it to be at his hand. And he thought the only way to do this was to kill off a bunch of people, but present everyone with a credible threat from beyond that would force people to work together. Fine. And that's supposed to be the real world solution. Now that's all gone belly up. So he's like, hey, I got to go find Dr. Manhattan, who can pretty much wipe all this stuff away from me. So it's like, couldn't you just ask Dr. Manhattan, hey, we can't stop fighting. Why don't you just, fix everything with the wave of your hand, which is what you're going to be asking in this right over here. And then we would have never had the issue in the first place. So how that plays out will be interesting. But for me right now, it's not necessarily a plot hole, but it's definitely a plot pinhole as of right now. Because if this guy can just fix anything, you could have asked him to fix it before you decided to come up with this plot. Unless it's one of these Lex Luthor type plots, like with Superman 22, where I've got to be the one to do it until I realize I can't do it. Now you can do it, along those lines.
In fact, that's how I took it. I took it that he was like, this is my idea. I think it works excellently. And then realized, oh my goodness, there's a problem. I got to do something about this. Who can help me? Dr. Manhattan. That's how I got it. I didn't get like him saying, hey, let me just do this. I need someone who can help me. He thought he was smart enough and powerful enough to do what he needed to do, right? And then it turned out,
didn't work out.
Crap.
Well, this has to be a really big failing if the fact that Rorschach's journal, which nobody could have identified as Rorschach's journal, because nobody knew they didn't know his identity or anything.
Yes.
The fact that this journal could come out and, Ozymandias, who is the smartest person on the planet, that his whole plan could fall apart
simply
based on the fact of this journal. So I don't know if this is going to actually, again, this is predicated that you have read Watchmen and that you're going to buy into it, because the Watchmen universe is pretty much Murphy's Law, where anything that can happen, or rather anything that can go wrong, will go wrong. Because that's a pretty big failing at the end of the day for such a well thought out plan. The fact that this guy kept a journal and so many people are going to believe it. When you've equated world peace in 1992, you would think that the opposite would be true, that people would, no, you're trying to divide us again or something of that nature. We finally have world peace. We don't believe it. It's almost like these guys were waiting for it. Hey, yeah, sure. Finally, we don't have to work together anymore. I'm going to attack Poland, busting through the wall, that sort of thing. So there are those bits right there that, again, I won't say they're plot holes, but they're definitely pinholes, that, they can get bigger over time if,
Or it could be closed. If they can do a better job.
We'll see. They're there.
And then in the end of the story, Superman has this dream of his prom.
Yeah.
And I guess it's a little different, and then something horrible happens, and Superman says he hadn't ever had a nightmare.
Right.
And it's trying to force him in, shoehorn him into the story, but I'm not sure how that works out. But he's in there, and he's with Lois, and it's, but
I gotta ask
it's kind of shoehorned in.
I mean, I've read the comic, and I was like, Superman has never had a nightmare, ever? Is that true?
That's hard to answer, because that is very hard to answer, because this book is supposed to be bleeding the DC universe and the Watchmen universe together at the seams, I would say. And the DC universe rebooted in 2011, so if I was to say, I could say, no, Superman's had nightmares before, but all of that came before this particular universe. So he could be speaking truthfully that he's never had a nightmare before. And and then just as recently as earlier this year, you had Superman Reborn, where they redid everything with him all over again. So yeah, it could be that he's never had a nightmare before based on this continuity. If it's a longer continuity, then I would have to say no. But then it really starts getting into the weeds, because there's so much stuff they've done with Superman in terms of his continuity within the last 5 or 6 years, that unless you're a consistent reader, it's really hard to follow. The only thing that I would state over here is, I don't know if that's a natural nightmare or if that's just something that's bleeding over from the Watchmen universe. Because even that recollection right there seems really odd. Like that's not John Kent talking to him. It's more like the Man of Steel John Kent talking to him along those lines. You know, so like you're reading this and like, okay, I see what they're going for. I mean, I see what you're getting at too, Pete. But what I've been getting so far is that, you know, we see the button, okay, over here. And then other things have been bleeding through, and then it's been bleeding through because of some machination on somebody else's part. And the big machination is that there's somehow they've affected time. Hence why the whole clock and the cover with Superman being slowly but surely disintegrating into to pieces of a clockwork. So somehow they've messed with time, you know, along those lines. They're bleeding through. I don't know how well. Again, I don't know how well it's going to work out. I thought it was a strong start.
Yes.
I thought it was a strong start in that, yeah, there's some pinholes there and definitely some stuff that you would perk up at. I mean, you know, what Rorschach showing his hand doesn't mean anything for anyone unless you've read Watchmen and know that Rorschach in Watchmen was white and this guy's black. If he is black, or if he's just not showing a colored hand or what have you. But Rorschach, for the most part, he wore a full face mask. You never got to see him with gloves, full face mask. His body was totally covered. The average person in that universe shouldn't know that Rorschach was white unless they had some personal relationship with him. And I doubt Rorschach would have had personal relationships with most of those people. So, you know, stuff like that leans heavily on the fact that Watchmen, I mean, that's a big assumption too. Well, Watchmen is something that everybody had to have read. And like Watchmen came out, I didn't read that book fully until like I was in my 30s, and it came out when I was a kid.
Same here.
I read issue here, issue there, and I wasn't really, you know, big on the art. So I was like, okay, and then I would read pieces of it here. So I was very familiar with the storyline, but I didn't read the whole thing until some point. So that's a big thing to lean on. But in terms of overall story, I mean, it's marrying itself to the grid, from Watchmen, and a lot of the pacing. But I still thought the story overall was strong. I like the fact of, okay, if this is the Watchmen universe, and this is just a universe that's pretty much destined to be screwed up from start to finish, if that's what the real world is supposed to be like, the deconstructed superhero world is supposed to actually be like, then what's the end result of this world if they just can't get it right? Okay, because that's not our world. When they try to say, well, look, this is what superheroes would be like in our world. We get things right. We screw up, but we do get things right. That's the reason why we're still here. The Watchmen world, and I'm bringing this up because, Ozymandias' plan was so strong. For it to be undone by a journal, that can't be...
I would like to add on to those points, because if we look at this, what Jeff Johns and Gary Frank they're doing well is using the sort of layout here, and then there's elements that we didn't really get, that was symbolic in the story, which was a clock,
Right.
that we didn't really get to see play out in the story. So it's like they're showing us the clock, and we're like, as continuity guys, we're like, oh, the clock is gonna mean, and Doomsday clock, did Alan Moore mean that? It's sort of like a DC serendipity. Did Alan Moore mean this when he was doing this and connecting to the regular DC universe?
You see Doomsday coming in.
Well, I'm not going to go to my Doomsday thing, but then, as you said, the grid, having the grid in there, so having those elements, playing with those elements.
And the color.
Yeah, but then one thing that I struggled with was when I read Watchmen, I felt it was more of a story about a well-rounded character, even though he's terrible in The Comedian. He's the most interesting character.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure he would really care about the Ozymandias' plot. I think he could probably give him a couple of dollars and the Comedian would forget about it.
I don't think at any point he really cared. I think he was just really either overwhelmed by it or flabbergasted. And then, because I guess he wasn't acting to type, if he had gone over to him and said, look, I want in, or I want to cut to be quiet, I think that would have been fine. But I guess the fact that he retreated and he's sitting over there trying to process what the hell, that they would go this far with the whole thing. I think that's why they had to take him out, because he was as well-rounded as he wasn't being his predictable self.
But I think it would more like, I always thought, who's that? Rorschach would be a better character for that mode of someone needing to be taken out because he found the secret out. But the Comedian's much interesting character, so I understand why he played that character, be the one to be killed and that sort of thing. But when we get to the end with the space alien and the plot, it sort of got to besides taking from the Outer Limits, like just taking it from an Outer Limits episode, they're also, I didn't really buy into the space alien part. So then also, who's that? Rorschach is discredited. So when he's discredited as this like guy who's crazy, I'm not sure that his journal would carry weight. And some of the stuff that you said, this journal would just pop up, and maybe it'd be like a conspiracy theory, but I'm not sure it would everything would fall down on Adrian that quickly. So it's like some of the elements they're playing with is some of the stuff that I really wasn't interested in. So that's what's taking me out of this story, because I didn't really like the ending that much. But this is where he's going. Let's see how it plays out. It's only the first issue, but that's only for me because I was just like, I like all this comedian stuff. This is what drew me in. This ending is like the supervillain plot. And I was like, I don't know if he needed to do it because we had such an interesting, and not saying realistic, but well-developed character in the comedian and having all these facets of what he did. So it's not getting into the stuff I liked in Watchmen, but, we had before Watchmen, we got Doomsday Clock, they're just exploring this Watchmen stuff, and they survived, before Watchmen, so we'll see what happens. So
what do you think about Rorschach getting these other people together? I mean, that's another point that I didn't understand of it. I mean, again, this is kind of early. What do you think? Getting the marionette, the mine, and others. What do you think about that? I mean, what's the purpose of all that? Where
is
they
there going to be more, though? Is there going to be more characters they're going to bring in from the Charlton? Like,
I would hope not. You got enough to deal with. You got enough to deal with making this fly, and then you still have to work in all the DC characters in there and make this sensible at the end of the day. Next issue is supposed to deal with, Lex Luthor, I believe, is supposed to make an appearance next issue. Batman is supposed to come.
What is Batman going to do in this? Because just to have him go against Rorschach? Or the new Rorschach? It's not even the one
They'll try to work some detective angle or something of that nature. But the bigger story...
Oh, because he found the button. Sorry, he found the button.
The bigger story at the Flash will probably work in somehow too, because they'll work the detective angle. But the big draw in this story is what? Dr. Manhattan, Superman.
Yeah.
That's the big draw of it. So you're starting here, and again, I thought it was a strong start. But you make a good point at the end of the day, where they bring Superman into it, and the way he's brought in is kind of like, all right. And then the question is not so much how he's going to work into this. It's the same thing. He's never had a nightmare before, really. Okay, but those sorts of things there. I mean, we're going to have to read on. In order to understand, in order to fully understand. But I don't know. I have to admit, I'm pretty optimistic about this series based on my first read, and I don't say that often with a lot of books that I sit down and read. I went over this a couple of times, and I'm probably going to read it, a couple of times more, just so I'm centered on it. But I mean, I like what DC has done with this one. I mean, they did the variant covers, but nothing like what was done with Metal. Where Metal had like 16 variant covers for this, and depending on your store, there are 4 covers. That's pretty much the end of it. There's enough story here to, I believe, drive some sales, and there is a story in here that I want to see told, because DC Comics surrendered a lot. Whether they realized it or not, they surrendered a lot of the verve and the wonder of their universe once they saw, hey, Watchmen works. We can sell this type of stuff. We can make our stuff more serious. And there is no doubt in my mind that when you see things that came afterwards, like Robin being killed off, later on with Superman being killed, Batman's bat being broken, that had a gestation period that started with Watchmen. So the end result is now what? Almost 40 years later? Is that it?
Yeah.
Almost 40 years later, now they have to look back on the decision that was made in terms of, it wasn't that, hey, Watchmen is great, we can keep doing stories like that. No, we're going to let this bleed over into the DC universe the same way that they're doing with this story. And I want to see what their end result, I really want to see what their, did they learn anything from the experience is what I want to see through this comic.
Well, when you were with me in the Comic-Con, the New York Comic-Con panel,
yes.
I think Jeff Johns did a pretty admirable job of explaining what was going on. He didn't go in detail, but I mean, he said that he put a lot of thought and effort into it. And it wasn't something that just came out of mind. They tried to make sure that the continuity matched what they were talking about. He was saying that. You were right there with me.
He was saying that. I don't know if I agreed or believed it.
God.
I would say that, this is them holding as long as they could before Watchmen was sort of an 80s approach, like way Marvel would do, touching on stuff but not changing anything. And this one is the closest they've gotten, because they took a lot of heat for it, even though if it sold. This is Jeff Johns being the top in the industry and I think, eclipsing Alan Moore, being that he can do a story with this and not have everyone just flip out and say blasphemy, and everyone gets it. Like who is it? Grant Morrison. A lot of different writers have come and taken that top spot. Mark Miller, like that sort of thing, where they're touching on stuff that's Alan Moore territory, and and the closest to really chop at him is Grant Morrison, because he's been chopping since the 80s.
Well, I thought his Pax Americana was spot on. I really enjoyed that. And I enjoyed it because he used the Charlton characters. We say, you could have used them, but we couldn't use them. So if we go along those lines.
But overall, the comic book was generally okay. I mean,
no, this is good. I wouldn't even say this is okay. This is good.
But can you even use these characters? Alan Moore didn't allow it. Can you? Is this blasphemy?
Yes.
Okay. Then we're good.
Without a doubt, this is the Latin Vulgate.
Right. So,
and you didn't listen. You said no. You can't worship the Apocrypha. You're like, no, we're right over here.
So one thing I gotta say, this comic is a lot of value. I mean, look, the price is what, $5 now.
Yes.
You're getting variant covers. There's some that are
Well, this one was $5. Other ones were cheaper.
All right, so others are cheaper.
Oh,
right?
okay.
And I think the lenticular one was a little bit more expensive. I think that
I
was
believe
$5.99,
so.
right?
Yeah.
But I mean, look at the story. I mean, this is like pages upon pages upon pages, and that's it. And you're gonna have 12 episodes, and it's not going to be going on to other comics that you're going to be forced to read. You can stick to the story.
You don't know
And
that.
But that's what he said in the comic.
That's what he said.
No, you don't know that.
Yo, you are being horrible, bro.
I'm not being
we were
horrible.
Not together, man. It's like you're
I'm
trying to shoot
saying
the guy
that
down.
I'm calling BS at times.
Yeah, this is a hit.
I'm not saying he
You
didn't
told
say
me
that.
six issues in, this is a hit. We're not going to say, hey, guess who's going to make an appearance in the Flash from the pages of Doomsday Clock. It's not a crossover per se.
This is a self-contained story in here. Just the way that you had.
Until the mime and the marionette make a appearance in the Flash because they got lost in there.
That's the other thing. This is Secret Wars right now, because 12 parts, and then it bled over into the regular. Jim Shooter said I needed change. So have some change happen in your story, and that's how we got all that stuff. This, you're gonna say they start introduce characters that we like, because I don't even know is the mind's power. Can he does it some sort of thing that's happening, and when he acts like he has guns,
right?
That sort of thing is I was interested to find out what their power. You see their powers right, and not sort of hint at them, to see them, so we could see these guys come out of it.
They can come out and say they'll come, but I'm saying in terms of the story, the story set.
That's crazy. So he'll have his own Watchmen character.
Oh my gosh! Right, we're starting, dude. You're just going down the wrong rabbit hole. Man. Look, go out and buy it. Damn it! There are 4 or 5 different covers. Buy the covers if you like it. This is what, the 1157 one?
This is not how you treat a comic book, just so you know. This is
Lord,
not how you treat a comic book.
Me, I'm having a hard time.
Check me out on Comic Book Hero. We'll show you how to treat a comic book.
This is the 1157 release one, right? Are they going to be able to get this one? No one's going to be able to get this.
Yeah, everybody's going to get it.
Damn. All right, so I'm going to just pass it out.
What are you doing?
I'm
Spin a rack out.
Yeah, he's not coming back.